This is APYouthNet.
Hello and welcome back to the APYouthNet Talkshow, where we look at some of the key issues affecting young people in Asia Pacific today. I'm Sophy Fisher from the International Labour Organization. Today's programme is a special edition. It's coming live from the International Youth Day event at the UN in Bangkok. And to mark the day, the UN has been organising a series of debates among young people on the issues relating to sustainable development. The theme of partnerships, which is the theme for this year's International Youth Day, is particularly important because many young people now feel excluded politically, financially, socially, and in terms of employment. So those are some of the issues we'll be looking at today, and we're also very lucky to have a live audience in the studio with us. Our guests today are Fa, who is at the Pan-Asian International School, Nanda Krairiksh, who's chair of the Asia-Pacific UN Interagency Group, and Matthieu Cognac, the ILO's specialist on youth employment for Asia and the Pacific. Thank you all very much for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for coming too. Nanda, let me start with you. Can you give us a bit of background to the International Youth Day and to this year's theme?
Well, the UN has been placing a lot of importance on youth and the role of youth in participation for quite some time now. Some of you may recall that as far back as 1985, the United Nations proclaimed the International Year of Youth. And from that time onwards, we've also been commemorating International Youth Day. And it gives us an opportunity to focus on the role of youth as agents of change, particularly now as the UN is focused on building a better future for all.
And can you give us some ideas of some of the way that the UN in Bangkok is partnering with young people?
Well, we're working with young people to try to include their ideas, their views in formulating national policies, in formulating national programs. I think the emphasis is that youth must be participating in these processes. We need to hear their views. They need to be part of decision-making processes, both at the governmental level and also, as partners in all aspects of development.
And so today's event, today's debates, was specifically designed to get young people into the UN and engage them in the processes?
Yes, definitely. And it's on a very current issue because we've just concluded a very important summit on sustainable development in Rio. And at that summit, our leaders emphasize the role that young people have to play in terms of promoting economic, social, and political processes in promoting sustainable development.
Yes, because of course young people have an even more acute interest in the future than those of us who are not quite so young.
Yes,
and those were among the topics being debated today, I think.
Yes, we had actually various aspects of the Rio agenda discussed, focusing on whether young people felt the outcome was one that they could identify with. We focused on gender issues. We focused on issues related to education, employment.
Fa, you were part of the debating teams today. How did you find the event?
I found it informative. Otherwise, as a youth, as a normal youth, I wouldn't go and do a research about, the topics that was being said in the debate. So this event made us more aware of what's happening around the world and about the Rio +20 conference that we don't have that much idea about the event. It is on the news, but we don't know in depth what was that, what implementations could we contribute. But
you mean like why it was important for you?
Yeah, and how can we help to implement the declarations?
And now do you think you have a better idea? Do you feel more engaged with the process?
I feel more engaged with the process, and I feel more engaged with the United Nations. I feel that youth could make decisions.
Well, that's a vote of confidence, Nanda.
Yes. Very positive sign then.
And do you feel that your colleagues who took part in the debate, because there were quite a lot of people, there were 6 to 8 debating teams, do you think they felt the same, that they feel now more informed and engaged in processes related to sustainable development?
I'm confident to say that they're more informed, but I'm not sure if they feel more engaged. But however, if we have this kind of events continuously, we will eventually feel more engaged in decision-making process.
Okay, and Matthieu, let me move on to you. The ILO, of course, is particularly interested in employment issues relating to young people. These kind of events to get young people engaged in the issues and in the policy issues as well, but as well as the on-the-ground issues. How does the ILO approach that?
Well, I think first of all, today was a fantastic event. It was really great to see the interaction of all these young people and all of their energy. And it proves the point that not only the ILO, but really this interagency group is making, which is that there is no point. It's completely useless to develop any youth employment or youth policies or strategies if we don't hear from the young people themselves, if we don't include them into the debate. Today was a perfect example. We actually had a series of debates and they showed their opinion. And the ILO is taking that as well very strongly. So for example, at the previous International Labour Conference that just ended, a big part of the discussions were involving the young people directly and having their say in the discussion, in the dialogue, permitted to reach some conclusions that otherwise maybe wouldn't have been there.
Okay, great. And as I said earlier, we have an audience here of young people, so I'd like to encourage them, if they have any questions to ask, to just come up to the mic and we can put them to the panel, or even if they have any comments, simple comments to make on what the panel says. Let me ask you a little bit more, Matthieu, about the kind of practical work that the ILO has been doing to try and get the voices of young people heard at policy-making level. Because we see them on the television when they're vox-popped, we hear about them in the newspapers. When we have debates like this, they're able to put forward their points of view. But still, it's quite rare for young people's opinions and voices and concerns to be heard at the absolute top level of policy making, where changes have to be made.
Well, what we have found out at this very recent International Labour Conference is that it was not only a good thing for the young people to come and participate and raise their concerns and also provide everyone with their suggestions as to what they think we should be focusing on, but it was also a reality check for those government, employer and worker organizations that were present and that somehow sometimes can feel a little bit disconnected from the reality that these young people face every day. Let's not think only about the young people who have a chance to achieve higher level education. Let's think about the young people who live in the informal sector, in the informal economy, those who live below the poverty line. It's very important to find ways to reach out to them as well. I'm not saying that it is easy. I'm not saying that they are systematically heard or listened to in debates and at policy level discussions, but the work starts at the local level. And if we don't have a very strong willingness and a very strong commitment, starting in our case with the UN and other partners, because there are also other partners represented by civil society, I think that we are here putting our step in we are going in the right direction.
And Nanda, as the chair of the interagency group, how do you tackle the problem of being at the policy-making level and yet actually still keeping in touch with the grassroots of your constituency, young people?
What we have done through the interagency group and also through the United Nations various agencies is that bringing youth to have a direct interface with government leaders. And this happened last year during the General Assembly special session on youth, where we had leaders come in and interact with young people, and young people actually expressing their ideas on many, many global issues and giving their views. This is done regularly by the UN, and we have been doing this on various issues, such as HIV. As you know, 95% of all new infections in Asia Pacific occur among young people who are key affected populations. It's very important then, if we're going to formulate the right policies and the right programs, that we hear from young people and that our leaders and our senior officials actually listen to them in terms of what successes can be capitalized on in terms of policies and programs.
Fah, do you feel that the issues that affect you and your friends at school and at college are those that you actually hear policymakers in Thailand talking about? Or are in fact your concerns completely different?
Not really. The things that are affecting us aren't informed by the government. For example, I watched the news lately, and what they're focusing on is more on the economy. For example, the rice pledging program, that's what they're focusing on. However, we as students, we are not really affected by that.
Okay, so
Well-
what are you worried about right now? What are your concerns?
My concerns, violence in students.
And what about looking slightly medium and longer term?
In the longer, I'm quite concerned about how Thai education is, because it's not really open-minded like we international students are. They're more focused on the by the book. They're so by the book that they don't go like us. They don't think.
You don't
That-
think it's preparing you to compete?
Yeah, especially when the ASEAN is opening.
So the issue is one of the skills and whether they are the relevant skills that are going to help you get a good job and develop your career.
Yes, and about English as a second language for the native Thais. Most of the majority of students who are in Thai schools, they don't have that much strong English skills, and the ASEAN is opening up, so it's going to be real trouble for the future youth.
Nana, I can see you nodding. That's something that obviously
No,
means something to you.
It's certainly a very important issue that Fa has brought out, because we need to have better investment in quality education in countries such as Thailand and other Asian countries. Because if the focus is not on enhancing the quality and the relevance of education, you're going to have a very, very difficult transition from education to the world of work, which is a huge problem in this region, but also all over the world, because youth unemployment is 3 times higher than non-youth unemployment.
Okay, Matthew, I've got to bring you in at this point, because you sit both with the policymakers and you spend a lot of your time talking to young people as well. How do we bridge this gap to make sure that people like Far, and actually also people who are less lucky than her, who don't go to international schools, get the right kind of skills, which will not only help them build their careers, but of course will build the economies of tomorrow?
Well, there are different dimensions to your question. First of all, regarding their involvement, and getting young people involved is getting them involved even at the political level, at the local level, involved in the life of their communities and of their cities, so that they grow as concerned citizens. In terms of them acquiring the right skills and really having a better chance than others at obtaining a job, because Nanda mentioned the 3 times more likely. In fact, in Southeast Asia, in some of the countries, it can be up to 6 times more likely to be unemployed. The average being 3 times. In places of in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, youth unemployment reaches about 15%. So what do we do to give these young people a better chance? We need to have them enter the world of work at an early age. We need them to be exposed to what it is to work on a daily basis. And how to do that? Well, you have different options. One of them is internships or apprenticeship programs. The other thing that is very important to consider is to remove the stigma that exists and that is often attached to the vocational and to the technical school and education. It is okay, it is a good thing to go through a vocational training school, and there is no shame in trying to go that way, as opposed to trying to pursue, let's say, higher studies. In fact, when you look at many of the jobs of the future, where are they? They are in engineering, and or they're also in services, but they are in many of the professions which skills are taught at those vocational training schools.
Okay, and I just want to bring in the issue of partnerships here, because that's the theme of Youth Day this year. The ILO's partners are governments, workers, and employers' organisations. Do they have a role in partnering with young people, workers and employers' organisations as well, to solve this issue?
Well, absolutely. First of all, with the workers, it's important for the young people to be aware of their rights at work, because this is a place where discrimination starts. If you're a young person eager to have a job, you get one, and you're not aware of your rights, chances are you'll be very likely, or much more likely than those who are aware, to feel some level of discrimination or even some level of abuse. So it's very...
But in terms of building up their relevant skills and so forth?
Well, yes. So it's important for the young people to join the unions, because the unions today are not enough represented by young people. And it's also very important for the employers to engage into a better communication with the young people. Why? Because we need to really promote as much as we can this intergenerational dialogue. And on the workplace, the employers have everything to benefit from having younger workers and the more senior ones working together in a collaborative way. Because the senior ones, before they retire, they usually have a wealth of knowledge they would like to share. And in terms of training and being the mentors that they can be, there is an opportunity and an opportunity cost that is incurred by not maximizing on this mechanism.
Right. Well, let's go to our audience now and get a little bit of input from the young people who are watching this debate.
Hello, my name's Anas. I'm a Pakistani American. I have one question considering about one of your points about internship and how you can convince. I want to ask you, like, how would you convince the youth to work? Usually, kids or teens don't like to work, and if I went into an internship program, and when I was working, like, they don't usually treat you as a worker. They treat you as a minor. Okay, you don't have to really do your job. You can sit back because you're not getting paid. You're just going there. So companies don't treat the internship process seriously, and the youth has it in their mind, oh, this is how easy work is. So, okay, that's no problem. So I want to ask you, like, how would you convince the youth, and how would the companies really take it seriously as a serious employee?
So it's a case of like how both sides are convinced to take it as a serious proposition rather than simply a time filler, both the employers and the young people involved. Matthieu.
Well, thank you for the question. I think that you have put your finger on something that is very important, which is that there is a level of abuse that has been observed from employers who offer internships because they are cheap or oftentimes actually free labor. And so there needs to be an end to that, and it goes with awareness raising and everything else. But there is another thing that we need to mention that maybe is not captured fully in what we are hearing, which is that for many young people, there is no other choice than to work. We're living in Asia and the Pacific, where with the poverty levels that they are in many of the countries and the level of the size of the informal sector, if young people don't work, they don't survive. And so they are forced into what? They are forced into work that is, we would say, not decent. They are forced into work that pays under the level where everybody should be paid, work where there is discrimination, work where there are no rights at work, and so on. So many young people actually, you would not have to do lots of efforts to convince them to come and join either internship programs or apprenticeship programs. What is important, I think, is to find the right mechanisms so that the employers create those apprenticeship programs with the understanding that they have everything to gain in capitalizing on this energy and on this motivation that is being offered by the lever available from young people.
Fa, I'd like to ask you, what do you and your friends think about things like internships and apprenticeships? I mean, do you think they're valuable, or do you think they're just like cheap labor and you're being exploited?
I think internship is a good thing, and as well, I think many of my friends think internship is a good thing. For when we think of internship, we think of medical students. They go for internship when they're becoming surgeons and all those things. So I think it's a good thing, in my perspective.
Nanda, I mean, looking across the region, do you think that employers in Asia Pacific put enough credence on the value of internships and apprenticeships and things like that?
I want to take a positive perspective on this, and just talk in general about internships, whether they, be in companies or even the United Nations, because I think the young people have to see them as opportunities, just as employers have to see this as an opportunity to bring in new, fresh blood, new ideas. And it's very important then that we focus on the right duties and the right responsibilities for an intern to maximize the full potential of the intern, and also to maximize the benefit that the intern can contribute to the work of the organization or a company. And I, for one, have benefited a lot from interns working with me in the United Nations. I've tried very carefully to make sure that the responsibilities match the skills that they have, and also that we also need to provide the right supervision to guide them in their work. And I have found that it's been a very fulfilling experience for both parties and that we have benefited. And some of my interns actually have come back to apply for United Nations positions and have succeeded in getting very, very good jobs with the UN system.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great to go. Okay, I think we have another question now.
Hello, my name is Shani. I'm now currently studying in the Johns Hopkins University, and I'm the intern for UNESCO. And I have a problem regarding some situation of China because I come from China. One thing is that, in China, most of the youth are still focusing on in some rural areas. But, for those people they live in rural areas, they are lacking of being informative, or even, they can't get the fair education, the fair social treatment, like those kind of things. How could UN agencies help those people living in the rural areas? Because, some of them live in quite far away, in quite a remote area. It's not very convenient to talk with them. And my another question is that, I think most of the Asian countries we are now facing the same challenges, that although many classmates or many friends around me, we graduate in some particular major. For example, I'm studying diplomacy or this kind of things, but however, it's very, very hard for us to find some related job. Find the job related with the major we are studying. I think it is frequently happening in many Asian countries. We also call it as a kind of special kind of the employment. So I wonder that for UN agencies like ILO, like other agencies, do you have some special measures which can help us? For us, maybe most of us really like the major we learn, but how can you help us, to get a quite matchable job?
Okay, so two questions there. Thank you very much. Matthew, let me put to you first the question about young people in rural areas, many hundreds of thousands of those in Asia Pacific. How do they get the skills that can help them move on and build a better life?
Well, first it comes with the understanding and the appreciation that there are many opportunities for economic growth and employment level at the rural level. Many young people, it is true, migrate to the urban areas in the quest for a better job, but there is a lot that can be done by focusing on the local areas. And so this is why at the ILO, local economic development is something that we pay particularly attention to, because it involves at the same time, talking, members from the government, from civil society, and young people as well, who get together and who analyze what economic potential, what competitive advantages, what comparative advantages exist at the local level in order to maximize this, and which in turn encourages, of course, economic growth and eventually job creation.
Okay, and Nanda, I want to put the second question to you, which was a question about the matching of skills and the matching of available jobs.
If I could just take one step backwards, because the point that you've made is a very important one. It concerns inequality. And it concerns inequality not only across countries, but within countries. And, as we see, young people in the urban areas tend to benefit more from services of the governments. And young people in the rural areas then have a disadvantage. And what we have seen, studies have pointed out that, young people from poorer families, low-income families, have a harder time then in terms of educational achievement and attainment, which is going to affect their transition from education to the world of work. So what is required, in terms of government policies? I think in addition to what Matthew has said, which focuses on job creation, we also need to invest then in promoting access to quality education, not only in the urban centers, but in the remote rural areas, poverty-stricken areas, because education is a form of mobility and is one skill, that will help in terms of social mobility for young people. And given the right education, high quality education, and given job creation policies by governments, particularly job creation as probably the objective of macroeconomic policy, we can ensure a better matching then of skills with jobs.
Do you think devices like the internet and distance learning can help with this? Or in some rural areas is the problem that the physical infrastructure is actually too bad to even allow for that?
Well, I mean, I think in many rural areas, young people don't have access to computers, or in many countries, least developed countries, and so that might be an issue. I think the answer is that it is incumbent upon all governments to ensure universal access to education and other social services.
Fire, do you think is it tough for young people in Thailand who come from the rural areas to get ahead and to get decent skills?
It is tough for them because as a student in Bangkok, or in rural area, if you will, we have more access to the internet and we know more about the world. We know the different perspectives of the world. However, if you live in the rural areas, you wouldn't be in some of the rural areas, you wouldn't be able to access proper education. And if you talk about the internet, it gives you a lot of information about the world. You wouldn't be able to get that. And in order to be ahead of everyone, you should know more than everyone. So I think it is very difficult for students who are in rural areas to go ahead or cope with the information of the world in order to go ahead of us, students who live in the urban areas.
And of course, Thailand is by no means the poorest or least developed country in this region. Thailand actually is comparatively good compared to the other Mekong countries. Let's just go back to the second question, which was about the matching of skills and jobs. What I think is interesting about this is that we hear from the young people that they have a problem finding the job that matches the skills and the study that they have done. And we often hear from employers that they have a problem finding people who have the skills that they want. So something is going wrong here, or does everybody have unrealistic expectations?
I think one needs to study the job market in terms of also determining what one wants to pursue in education. So I think there's some practical elements that one has to take into account. However, this morning we did have young people actually tell us about partnerships that have been made by companies, by businesses with educational institutions, where this partnership then provides them with jobs after graduation. I mean, these things also need to be pursued together, and partnership with big business, with industry is very, very important in terms of matching skills with educational attainment.
Okay, and I think we now have time for one last quite quick question.
Thank you.
But if you could keep it brief, that would be great.
Thank you. Mohammed Najib Aziz from Morocco. You have been talking about job creations, but could you please tell us about the contribution of UN in professional orientation? And here I'm talking about orienting the students to what they can do in their future. Because in Morocco, for example, many people go to school, to go to university, not knowing what they really want. So they find jobs at the end that don't match their skills. And sometimes they don't even know about the work situation in the future. So that creates a lot of problems of employment. So instead of creating jobs, we could also have like a proportion for like orienting people to what they can do in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Some sort of orientation process or program, Nanda.
Yes, the United Nations has a junior professional program, which is open to young people from all over the world, and it provides then young people with an opportunity to learn more about the United Nations in what we do. We work in all sectors. Peace and security, economic and social sectors, human rights. And so really the range of areas in terms of pursuing education is quite broad. And I think there's always a niche area in whatever educational field that you might want to pursue. But definitely we could do more in terms of promoting more information and awareness about UN employment opportunities and internship opportunities that could lead then to future jobs in the UN.
Thank you.
If I can add to this, it's true that this problem that you have identified of the skills mismatch is a very big one. On the one hand, you see many universities that are offering courses that are becoming obsolete and that don't respond to the real job market. I think part of the answer is also to make that labor market information available to all at a local level. So we're putting a lot of efforts in trying to develop those little career centers or employment service centers at the provincial level, sometimes at district level, sometimes at a town level, where students or young people in general would be able to not only have access to those jobs that are available in their areas or a little bit beyond, but also be in a place where they can enhance their soft skills, because this is something that is very much in demand from the employers. A place where they can learn how to write a CV, how to undergo an interview process, and this kind of thing.
Fine, okay. Well, I think actually that's all we have time for in this show. So I'd like to thank our three panelists, Nanda Krairiksh, Matthieu Cognac and Fa, and also our studio audience for joining us here today and for their interesting questions. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you can join us again next time.
This has been an APYouthNet production.